He was taken by a Comanche warrior in the chaos of a raid, but when she spoke the one language he never expected, everything changed. This is the story of what happened next. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the Texas plains of 1875, baking the earth beneath it to a dusty brown. Thomas Ward wiped the sweat from his brow as he surveyed his modest ranch just outside of Fort Griffin. The land had been good to him these past 5 years, allowing him to build something from nothing after the war. His daughter Eleanor had grown into a fine young woman of 20 during their time here, becoming as essential to the ranch's operations as Thomas himself. Eleanor Ward was unlike most women in these parts. Having lost her mother to typhoid when she was just 12, she had learned to adapt to the harsh realities of frontier life. Thomas had insisted on her education, bringing tutors from back east whenever possible. Eleanor had shown a remarkable aptitude for languages, even spending time with a missionary couple who had lived among the Comanche and taught her their tongue, a decision Thomas now questioned daily. "Pa, the eastern fence needs mending," Eleanor called out as she rode in on her chestnut mare. Her long brown hair was braided and tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, her skin sun-kissed despite her efforts to stay shaded. "I'll see to it tomorrow," Thomas replied, his eyes scanning the horizon. Raids had been increasing lately as tensions between settlers and the remaining free Comanche bands intensified. "I don't want you riding that far out alone anymore, Ellie." Eleanor dismounted with a sigh. "Pa, we've talked about this. I'm careful and I know this land as well as you do." "It's not about knowing the land," he said, his voice gruff with concern. "It's about who else might be on it." As if summoned by his words, one of their ranch hands came galloping toward them, dust clouding behind his horse. "Mr. Ward," he shouted. "Comanche warriors spotted heading this way, maybe a dozen of them." Thomas's face hardened. "Get inside, Eleanor, now." But Eleanor stood her ground. "I can shoot as well as any man here, and you know it." "This isn't a discussion," Thomas growled, already moving toward the house to grab his rifle. "James," he called to the ranch hand, "alert the others and prepare to defend the homestead." The next hour passed in tense preparation. Ranch hands positioned themselves strategically around the property, rifles at the ready. Thomas insisted Eleanor remain in the house, but she stationed herself by a window with her own rifle, determined to defend her home. The attack came swiftly. Warriors on horseback descended upon the ranch with war cries that chilled the blood. Gunfire erupted, the acrid smell of powder filling the air. Thomas and his men fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered. From her position, Eleanor took careful aim, not wishing to kill but determined to protect. She saw a warrior fall from his horse after her shot, and felt a strange mixture of pride and sorrow. The battle seemed to be turning in their favor when Eleanor heard glass shattering at the back of the house. Heart pounding, she rushed toward the sound, only to find herself face to face with a Comanche warrior who had broken in. He was tall and imposing, with fierce eyes and streaks of red paint across his cheekbones. Before she could raise her rifle, he had knocked it from her hands and seized her. "Let go of me!" she cried out, struggling against his iron grip. To her surprise, a flicker of recognition passed across his face at her words. The warrior said nothing but dragged her toward the back door. Outside, another warrior waited with an extra horse. Despite her fierce resistance, Eleanor was lifted onto the horse, her hands bound to the saddle. The last thing she saw before they rode away was her father, emerging from behind a water trough, horror etched on his face as he shouted her name. They rode hard for hours, deeper into territories Eleanor had never seen. The warrior who had taken her led the small group, 5 men in total, each wearing expressions of grim determination. She observed him carefully, younger than the others, perhaps in his late 20s, with an air of authority that suggested leadership. When they finally stopped to make camp as dusk approached, Eleanor gathered her courage. The leader approached her, offering a water skin. As he did, she spoke in careful Comanche. "Why have you taken me?" His eyes widened slightly, the only indication of his surprise. After a long pause, he responded in the same language. "You speak the words of my people." "I learned from those who lived among you," she replied, her pronunciation careful but clear. He studied her with renewed interest. I am Swift Hawk, son of Standing Bear. Your men killed my brother in a raid last moon. Now we will trade you for our warriors held at the fort. Eleanor swallowed hard, understanding blooming. I am Eleanor Ward. My father will come for me. Yes, Swift Hawk said, his expression unreadable. That is what we count on. As night fell over the camp, Eleanor sat against a tree, her hands now tied before her rather than to the saddle. A small mercy. She watched Swift Hawk speaking with the other warriors, occasionally glancing her way. She couldn't help but notice the dignity in his bearing, so at odds with the savage descriptions she'd heard all her life from other settlers. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight Eleanor focused on staying calm and observant. Her knowledge of the Comanche language might be her only advantage. That, and the fact that Swift Hawk seemed intrigued by her ability to use it. Dawn broke over the plains, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Eleanor had slept fitfully, awakening at every sound throughout the night. Her body ached from the hard ground and the rough journey of the previous day. As she sat up, she noticed Swift Hawk already awake, watching the horizon with intense concentration. "We ride soon," he said in Comanche when he noticed her stirring. "There is food." Another warrior approached, offering her a piece of dried meat and a small portion of corn mush. Eleanor accepted it with a nod, her dignity intact despite her circumstances. As she ate, she observed the camp more carefully. These men were not the mindless savages of frontier tales. They moved with purpose, practiced efficiency evident in their every action. "Your people have stories about mine," Swift Hawk said suddenly, moving to sit across from her. "They say we are animals who kill without reason." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "And your people have stories about mine, that we are greedy, that we break every promise." A hint of surprise flickered across his face. "You speak truth when many would not." "What good would lies do me now?" she replied. Swift Hawk studied her for a long moment. "How did you learn our tongue?" Eleanor took a sip from the water skin before answering. "A missionary couple lived near us for 2 years. They had spent time with Comanche people who had moved to the reservation. They taught me." "Why would you want to learn?" This question seemed more personal somehow. Eleanor considered her answer carefully. "I believe understanding begins with language. My father says I'm too curious for my own good." Swift Hawk's expression remained unreadable, but something in his eyes shifted. "Your father is probably right." The camp broke quickly after that, and soon they were riding again, heading deeper into territory rarely traversed by white settlers. Eleanor took note of landmarks, silently mapping their journey in her mind. If opportunity for escape presented itself, she would need to know her way back. By midday they had reached a hidden valley where a larger Comanche encampment was situated. Eleanor's heart sank at the sight of perhaps 30 lodges. Any hope of imminent rescue dimmed considerably. The arrival of Swift Hawk's party caused a stir in the camp. People emerged from their teepees, watching with curious eyes as the white woman was brought into their midst. An older man with long gray-streaked hair and deeply lined features approached. His bearing was regal, his gaze penetrating. Without being told, Eleanor knew this must be Standing Bear, Swift Hawk's father and likely the chief of this band. Words were exchanged in rapid Comanche, too quick for Eleanor to fully grasp. She caught mentions of trade, fort, and warriors, confirming Swift Hawk's earlier explanation of their intentions. Standing Bear turned his attention to her, his dark eyes assessing. "You are the rancher's daughter," he said in halting English. "Your father is important man." Eleanor straightened her shoulders. "My father is Thomas Ward. He is respected, yes." Standing Bear nodded slowly. "Good. Then they will listen when we ask for our brothers to be freed." Swift Hawk spoke up in Comanche. "She speaks our language, father." The older man's eyebrows rose slightly. He switched back to his native tongue. "Is this true, daughter of Ward?" "Yes," Eleanor replied in Comanche. "I learned from those who lived among your people." A murmur ran through the gathering crowd. Standing Bear studied her with renewed interest. "Interesting. You will stay in my son's lodge until arrangements are made." As Swift Hawk led her toward one of the teepees, Eleanor noticed the curious stares of women and children. One small boy ran alongside them for a few paces, pointing at her hair before being called back by his mother. Under different circumstances, Eleanor might have found their curiosity endearing. The lodge was simple but comfortable, with buffalo robes spread on the ground and a small fire pit in the center. Swift Hawk untied her hands but gestured for her to remain inside. "I will post a guard," he said. "Do not try to leave." "Where would I go?" Eleanor replied reasonably. "I don't even know where we are." Something like respect flickered across his features. "You are wise not to run foolishly to your death. Many of your people would try anyway." "Many of my people haven't spent years learning to understand yours," she countered. He regarded her curiously. "Understanding does not seem to be common between our peoples." "No," Eleanor agreed softly. "It doesn't." Swift Hawk left her then, securing the entrance flap behind him. Eleanor sank down onto one of the buffalo robes, finally allowing herself a moment of uncertainty. Her father would be frantic with worry, perhaps already organizing a search party. But would he find her? And if he did, what would happen to these people? She had grown up hearing stories of bloody conflicts between settlers and Comanche warriors, each side committing atrocities against the other. Yet sitting here, in the heart of a Comanche camp, she found herself questioning the simplicity of those narratives. These were people with families, with customs and beliefs of their own. Swift Hawk himself was not the mindless savage of frontier tales, but a man defending his people as surely as her father defended their ranch. As the day wore on, a young woman brought her food and water. Eleanor thanked her in Comanche, earning a startled look and a shy smile in return. Later, Swift Hawk returned, accompanied by an older woman who carried additional blankets. "My aunt," he explained simply. "She says the nights grow cold." Eleanor nodded gratefully to the woman. "Thank you for your kindness." The woman replied in rapid Comanche, too quick for Eleanor to catch completely. But she gathered it was something about Swift Hawk ensuring her comfort. The woman cast a meaningful glance between them before departing, leaving Eleanor wondering at her implication. "Your people will be contacted tomorrow," Swift Hawk informed her, switching to English with noticeable effort. "A message will be sent." "Will they hurt my father?" Eleanor asked, unable to keep the concern from her voice. Swift Hawk's expression softened slightly. "No harm if they agree to trade. We want our brothers back, not more blood." As night fell over the camp, Eleanor listened to the sounds of life continuing around her. Children laughing, dogs barking, the rhythmic beating of a drum somewhere in the distance. Swift Hawk had left her alone again, though she knew a guard remained posted outside. Despite her situation, curiosity began to overcome fear. Tomorrow would bring her face to face with her captor's true intentions. But tonight, she found herself wondering about the life Swift Hawk had led, and what had shaped him into the man who now held her fate in his hands. 3 days had passed since Eleanor's capture, each one bringing subtle shifts in her situation. The guard outside her lodge had become less vigilant, and she was now permitted to walk within the camp, though always under watchful eyes. Most significantly, her interactions with Swift Hawk had grown more frequent and less adversarial. This morning, she sat outside the teepee, watching the daily activities of the camp with genuine interest. Children played games that, despite their foreign context, reminded her of those she had played as a child. Women worked at various tasks, some tanning hides, others preparing food. The men maintained weapons or held council, their voices carrying across the encampment. "You watch us like you are learning our ways," Swift Hawk said as he approached, carrying 2 wooden bowls of stew. Eleanor accepted one with a grateful nod. "I am. There's much I didn't know." He settled beside her on the ground, his own bowl in hand. "What surprises you most?" She considered this as she took a bite of the savory stew. "How ordinary it all is," she finally said. "Different, yes, but the concerns are the same. Food, shelter, family, safety." Swift Hawk seemed to weigh her words. "Yet your people believe we are savages who think only of bloodshed. And your people believe all whites are greedy thieves who care nothing for the land," she countered gently. "Neither is entirely true, is it?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Perhaps not." They ate in companionable silence for a few moments before Eleanor ventured, "Has word been sent to the fort as you planned?" Swift Hawk's expression darkened. "Yes, 2 days ago. We await their response. And if they refuse the exchange, The question had haunted Eleanor since her capture. "Then the council will decide," he said simply, though his eyes betrayed concern. Eleanor nodded, understanding the implications. Her value as a hostage was tied directly to her father's influence and the authorities' willingness to negotiate. If that value diminished, her fate became uncertain. "Tell me of your life before," Swift Hawk said suddenly, changing the subject. "You spoke of missionaries who taught you our language." Surprised by his interest, Eleanor described her upbringing, her mother's early death, her father's determination to give her an education despite their frontier life, her own curiosity about the world beyond the ranch. "My father wanted to send me back east to finish my schooling, but I refused," she admitted. "The ranch is my home. I couldn't leave him alone." Swift Hawk nodded in understanding. "Family bonds are strong. It is the same among my people." "And your family?" Eleanor asked. "I've met your father, but you've mentioned a brother who was killed." Pain flashed across Swift Hawk's face. "Running Fox. He was younger than me by 2 winters. He died in a raid on white settlers last moon." Eleanor felt a pang of genuine sorrow. "I'm sorry. Was he like you?" Swift Hawk looked at her, surprise evident in his expression. "No, he was gentler, better with horses than weapons. He went on the raid to prove himself to our father." His voice hardened slightly. "He should not have died. No one should die in these conflicts," Eleanor said softly. "Not your brother. Not the settlers." Swift Hawk studied her face intently. "You believe this truly?" "I do," she affirmed. "There must be a better way than endless bloodshed." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the edge of the camp. A rider had arrived, and from the excitement surrounding him, Eleanor guessed he brought important news. Swift Hawk rose quickly, motioning for her to remain where she was as he strode toward the gathering crowd. Eleanor watched anxiously as Swift Hawk conferred with the messenger and his father. Their expressions were grave, their gestures animated. Something had gone wrong. Her heart raced as Swift Hawk turned and walked back toward her, his face a mask of controlled anger. "What is it?" she asked as he reached her. "The fort commander refuses to release our warriors," he said tersely. "He says they are raiders who will be tried under white man's law." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "And me?" Swift Hawk's expression softened slightly. "The council will meet tonight to decide. My father argues for your continued safety as leverage. Others are not so patient." Fear washed through her, but Eleanor fought to maintain her composure. "What do you argue for?" He held her gaze for a long moment. "I have not decided." That evening, Eleanor remained in the teepee, listening to the muffled voices of the council meeting nearby. Her future was being determined by people who, just days ago, she would have considered enemies. Yet now, after glimpsing their lives, their humanity, the situation felt infinitely more complex. Hours later, Swift Hawk entered the lodge. In the flickering firelight, his expression was unreadable. "What was decided?" Eleanor asked, rising to her feet. "You will remain here for now," he said. "Another message will be sent with greater urgency." Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by concern. "What does greater urgency mean?" Swift Hawk sighed, suddenly looking weary. "It means threats will be made. Threats I hope we do not have to fulfill." "You don't want more violence," she observed. "No," he admitted. "I have seen enough death. But many of our young men are eager to prove themselves, as my brother was." He met her gaze directly. "I told the council of your respect for our ways, your knowledge of our language. It helped sway those who called for harsher measures." "Thank you," Eleanor said softly. An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unspoken tensions. Finally, Swift Hawk spoke again. "Tomorrow I will show you something. Be ready at dawn." Before she could question him further, he was gone, leaving her with a curious mixture of apprehension and anticipation. The next morning, Swift Hawk arrived as promised, leading 2 horses. "We ride," he said simply. Under the watchful eyes of the camp, they mounted and set off, heading west into rolling hills. They rode in silence for nearly an hour before Swift Hawk slowed his horse near a small stream bordered by cottonwood trees. "This place," he said as they dismounted, "was sacred to my grandmother's people. She brought me here as a child." Eleanor looked around at the peaceful setting. It's beautiful. Swifthawk nodded, leading her to a large, flat rock overlooking the water. Sit, I must tell you something. Heart-pounding, Eleanor complied. Swifthawk settled beside her, his gaze on the distant horizon. My father and the others believe you are merely a trader's piece, a white woman to exchange for our warriors. He turned to look at her directly. But I see more. What do you see? Eleanor asked, barely above a whisper. A bridge, he said simply. Someone who might help our peoples understand one another, as you have begun to understand us. Hope sparked within her. Is that possible? Swifthawk's expression was serious. It is dangerous to hope for such things in these times, but I find myself hoping nonetheless. He hesitated before continuing. If the exchange fails, there will be those who demand your life as payment. And you? Eleanor asked, searching his face. What would you demand? Your safety, he said quietly, though I may not be able to guarantee it. The weight of his words hung between them, along with something else, something neither of them had anticipated when she was first brought to the camp as a prisoner. Their eyes held for a long moment before Swifthawk looked away, gesturing toward the stream. My grandmother said water carries messages to the spirits, he said. Perhaps it will carry ours for peace. As they sat together by the sacred stream, Eleanor felt a profound shift in her understanding, not just of the Comanche people, but of Swifthawk himself. He was no longer simply her captor, nor she merely his prisoner. They had become something far more complicated and far more meaningful. The 7th day of Eleanor's captivity dawned with a tension that hung over the camp like an approaching storm. The second message to the fort had been delivered, the ultimatum clear: release the Comanche warriors or face consequences. Eleanor knew that her life hung in the balance, though Swifthawk had not said as much. Standing outside the teepee, she watched as warriors prepared their weapons, their faces grim with purpose. Swifthawk approached, his expression troubled. They prepare for battle, Eleanor observed quietly. He nodded. If no response comes by midday, a party will ride to a settlement near the fort, not to attack, but to show our resolve. Eleanor's heart sank. More lives at risk. Yes, Swifthawk agreed, his voice heavy. A path neither of us wishes to follow. Over the past days, their connection had deepened in ways neither could have anticipated. Their conversations had grown longer, more personal. Eleanor had shared stories of her life on the ranch, her dreams of someday seeing the great cities of the East. Swifthawk had told her of Comanche traditions, of his hope to lead his people toward a future where they might maintain their ways while adapting to the changing world. Come, he said suddenly, walk with me. They moved away from the busy center of camp toward a quiet area near a stand of trees. When they were alone, Swifthawk turned to face her. I have been thinking through the night, he said, his voice low and urgent. There may be another way. Hope flickered in Eleanor's chest. What way? You, he said simply. Your understanding of both worlds. If you could speak to the fort commander, explain that further bloodshed serves neither side, you would let me go? Eleanor asked, surprised. Swifthawk's expression was complex, a mixture of determination and something deeper. Not alone. I would go with you, under a flag of truce. Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. That would be extremely dangerous for you. Yes, he acknowledged, but I believe you would ensure my safe return, as I have ensured your safety here. The trust implicit in his words moved her deeply. I would, she promised. But the others, your father, the council, will they agree? My father might be persuaded. Others will resist. His eyes held hers intently. But there is something else you should know. Scouts reported yesterday that your father leads a large party of men searching for you. They are perhaps 2 days' ride from here. Eleanor's heart leapt at the news of her father, but anxiety quickly followed. If they find this camp, there would be much bloodshed, Swifthawk finished grimly, which is why we must act now before they arrive. A plan quickly took shape between them. Swifthawk would convince his father that allowing Eleanor to speak to the fort commander, with Swifthawk accompanying her under a flag of truce, offered the best chance of resolving the situation without further violence. They would leave immediately, hoping to reach the fort before Eleanor's father and his search party could find the Comanche camp. I must speak with my father now, Swifthawk said. Prepare yourself for travel. If he agrees, we leave within the hour. Standing Bear was not easily convinced. Eleanor listened from a distance as father and son argued in rapid Comanche, their gestures becoming increasingly animated. Other warriors joined the discussion, some clearly opposing Swifthawk's plan. Through it all, Swifthawk maintained his position, occasionally glancing toward Eleanor with determination in his eyes. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, Standing Bear raised his hand for silence. He spoke a few words, his expression grave. Swifthawk bowed his head in acknowledgement before returning to Eleanor. He has agreed, Swifthawk said, relief evident in his voice. But we go with 2 warriors as escorts, and if there is any sign of treachery, they are to ensure neither of us returns to betray the location of the camp. Eleanor nodded, understanding the implications. There won't be treachery from me. I know, Swifthawk said softly, or I would not risk this. Within the hour, they were riding toward Fort Griffin, Swifthawk and Eleanor in the lead, 2 stern-faced warriors following at a short distance. They carried a white flag made from a cloth Eleanor had been given to use as a shawl, now tied to a long branch. The journey would take most of the day, with an expected arrival at the fort by nightfall. As they rode, Eleanor and Swifthawk spoke of what they would say to the commander, how they might convince him that peaceful resolution benefited all sides. But beneath these practical discussions ran a current of unspoken emotion, a recognition that regardless of the outcome, this journey marked a profound turning point for both of them. If we succeed, Eleanor said as they paused to rest the horses at midday, what happens afterward? Swifthawk's gaze was distant. My people will continue to seek ways to live in this changing world. Your father will take you home to your ranch. And you? She pressed gently. What will you do? He looked at her then, his expression softening. I will remember the woman who spoke my language and saw my people as people, not savages. Is that all? Eleanor asked, her heart quickening. Swifthawk hesitated, then spoke with careful deliberation. What more could there be in such times as these? Eleanor held his gaze steadily. Perhaps more than either of us dared imagine when you first brought me to your camp. Before he could respond, one of the escort warriors called out, pointing toward a dust cloud on the horizon. Swifthawk immediately tensed, scanning the distance. Riders, he said grimly. Many of them, moving quickly. Eleanor's breath caught. My father? Possibly. Or soldiers from the fort. Swifthawk turned to her, urgency in his voice. We must move faster. If they see us before understanding our purpose. They mounted quickly, spurring their horses to a gallop. The escort warriors flanked them protectively, one moving the white flag to a more prominent position. They rode hard toward a rise in the land, hoping to reach high ground where their flag of truce would be clearly visible. As they crested the hill, the riders came into clearer view. Eleanor recognized her father's tall figure at the head of a group of perhaps 20 men. They had not yet spotted Swifthawk's small party. There, she said, pointing. My father leads them. Swifthawk assessed the situation quickly. We will remain here on high ground. When they see us, I will raise the flag. You must call out to your father before his men decide to shoot. They waited tensely as the search party drew nearer. Finally, one of the men pointed toward them, and the group halted. Eleanor could see her father shading his eyes, trying to identify the figures on the hilltop. Now, Swifthawk said, raising the white flag high. Eleanor stood in her stirrups and called out, Pa, it's me, Eleanor, don't shoot. A moment of terrible suspense followed as her father conferred quickly with his men. Then he separated from the group, riding forward alone, his rifle visible but not raised. He comes, Eleanor said, relief washing through her. But only him. Swifthawk nodded. As it should be. I will go with you to meet him halfway. They rode down the slope slowly, the white flag still raised, leaving the escort warriors behind on the hill. Thomas Ward's face was a mixture of joy and wariness as he saw his daughter apparently unharmed, but in the company of a Comanche warrior. Eleanor, he called as they drew near. Are you hurt? I'm fine, Pa, she assured him, reining in her horse several yards from him. This is Swifthawk. He has protected me, and now brings me back to you under a flag of truce. Thomas's suspicious gaze shifted to Swifthawk. Is that so? After your people took her from our home? It is so, Swifthawk confirmed, his dignity unwavering under Thomas's scrutiny. We sought exchange for our warriors held at the fort. Now we seek peace instead. Eleanor quickly explained Swifthawk's proposal, that they proceed together to the fort to negotiate the release of the Comanche prisoners in exchange for a cessation of raids. Thomas listened skeptically, his eyes never leaving Swifthawk. Why should I trust your word? He finally asked the Comanche warrior. Swifthawk met his gaze steadily. Because your daughter does, and because more blood serves neither your people nor mine. Thomas looked to Eleanor, searching her face. You vouch for him, after they took you prisoner? I do, Pa, she said with quiet conviction. I've learned much among his people. They're not so different from us in what matters most. She hesitated before adding, and Swifthawk, he is a man of honor. Something in her tone made Thomas study her more closely, his expression shifting as understanding dawned. I see, he said slowly. And this matters to you, daughter? It does, she admitted, her cheeks warming. More than I expected. Thomas sighed heavily, then straightened in his saddle. Then we will go to the fort together. I know the commander. He might listen if both of us speak. Relief flooded through Eleanor. Swifthawk signaled to his warriors on the hill, who reluctantly turned back toward the Comanche camp to deliver the news to Standing Bear. The unlikely trio, rancher, daughter, and Comanche warrior, then rode toward Fort Griffin, followed at a distance by Thomas's men. At the fort, their arrival caused a stir of confusion and suspicion. The commander, Colonel James Harrington, was a stern man with little sympathy for the Comanche, but he respected Thomas Ward and was visibly relieved to see Eleanor safe. In his office, with Thomas's support, Eleanor and Swifthawk presented their case for peace. The cycle of violence benefits no one, Eleanor argued passionately. The Comanche warriors you hold were responding to encroachments on their hunting grounds. Swifthawk's people seek only to preserve their way of life. And you give your word that raids will cease if I release these prisoners? The colonel asked Swifthawk directly. I speak for my father's band, Swifthawk replied with dignity. We will keep the peace if you honor this agreement. After hours of tense negotiation, a compromise was reached. The Comanche warriors would be released, and in return, Standing Bear's band would maintain peace with the settlements around Fort Griffin. Thomas Ward would act as an intermediary in future disputes, with Eleanor serving as interpreter when needed. As they left the fort the next morning, the released Comanche warriors riding ahead to bring the news to Standing Bear, Eleanor found herself at a crossroads she had never anticipated. Swifthawk pulled his horse alongside hers as they reached the edge of town. You return to your father's ranch now, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Yes, she replied, then added softly, but not forever. Swifthawk looked at her questioningly. Eleanor smiled. The agreement names me as interpreter between our peoples. That means I'll be seeing you again. Your father may not approve of such meetings, Swifthawk observed, though hope flickered in his eyes. My father loves me, Eleanor said with confidence. He will learn to understand, as I have learned to understand your people. Thomas Ward rode up beside them, having overheard their exchange. My daughter has always had a mind of her own, he said gruffly to Swifthawk. I suspect that even if I forbade these interpretations, she would find a way. Swifthawk's lips curved in a rare smile. She is formidable. That she is, Thomas agreed with unexpected warmth. You're welcome at our ranch when matters require discussion, Swifthawk. Better that than my daughter riding off alone to find you. Eleanor looked between the two men in surprise and gratitude. Thank you, Pa. As they prepared to part ways, Swifthawk reached out, briefly touching Eleanor's hand. Until we meet again, he said in Comanche. Until then, she replied in the same language, a promise in her words that transcended the simple farewell. What had begun as captivity had transformed into something neither of them could have imagined, a bridge between two worlds, and the beginning of a bond that defied the conflicts of their time. As Eleanor rode home beside her father, she looked back once to see Swifthawk still watching her, his figure proud against the vast Texas sky, a symbol of hope for a different future than either of them had dared to dream possible.